Hello everybody, this is Mike. So congratulations if you're watching this video. It means that you have made the decision to take some direct action to get some long-term healing from the very painful results of having been in a romantic relationship with somebody who has an untreated cluster B personality disorder. Now, my experience is with somebody who was an untreated and undiagnosed borderline, and so that's where I'm going to be. I'm going to be talking about the borderline, but this probably can be helpful for anybody who's been with any cluster B personality disorder. So, before I go any further, let me just give my disclaimer. I am not a therapist. I am not a psychologist or a mental health professional in any way. I am not an expert in mental health or mental illness. I am simply somebody who had an intense romantic relationship with a woman whom I believe was an untreated, undiagnosed person with borderline personality disorder and PTSD and probably some other things. But point is that I have a personal experience. I have been on the other end of that after having been discarded in the most cruel, cold way I could have imagined. And then the lingering after effects, which still, it was as though I was still in the relationship. And everything, you know what I'm talking about if you've been through it. The intense self-doubt, this intense self-criticism, the guilt, the shame, the longing, the loneliness, the complete destruction of your own self-esteem, self-awareness, who you are in the world. You probably can't even think about the future or imagine a future for yourself. And you may be filled with pain and regret and longing. You may still fantasize about getting your BPD X back. But the main thing is that this is different from just your average bad relationship. It's even different than your average toxic relationship. There's something about borderline personality disorder and I imagine cluster B personality disorder relationships that is unique. There is a very intense, focused experience of just having yourself destroyed from the soul. I mean, it's the most intimate kind of destruction. It goes to the deepest part of you. And it feels like a soul sickness. It feels like a poison. I literally felt physically unwell. I felt an anxiety here in my solar plexus that just was like a ball, and it felt like it was going to cause me physical damage. Forget about my spiritual and mental and emotional state. So, this video series is designed to help you recover. And before we go any further, maybe it'll help you get out, because what I'm going to be doing in this series is, again, I'm not a therapist, so my intention is to not look at it clinically. I may use some psychotherapeutic type of language because I've been in therapy, my adult life. So I have some awareness about it from the perspective of a patient. So I may throw around a lot of words. If you haven't been in therapy, maybe you're not familiar with them. I'll explain them as I go along. A lot of the things I say are my own definitions, but what I have to offer and what I want to share with you is that I have achieved a state of full recovery. I don't have any pain in me regarding that relationship. I don't have any sadness in me regarding that relationship. I don't have any guilt. I don't have any confusion. I have no desire. I see it completely differently from the way I did before. There is no resentment or anger of any kind. I have no confusion. I know exactly what happened. and why it happened, and whatever pain, whatever sadness, whatever resentment, whatever longing that I think is normal, especially in these kinds of relationships, I'm free of that. So my goal here isn't to necessarily psychoanalyze you, and my goal is definitely not to just pick apart borderline personality disorder, nor is it my intention to demonize that very real mental illness of borderline personality disorder. My focus is to tell you the very practical steps that I took in order to achieve what I have. And so if you want what I have, you got to do what I do. The impetus for creating this video series was that as I was creating my channel, what was it? What is it called? Recovery from borderline personality relationship breakup. When I made that channel and I started sharing my thoughts and my experience and my viewpoint and what I was doing, people were asking if I would counsel them. And I thought very seriously about that, and I decided against doing that for a couple of reasons. The first one is, as I said, I'm not a therapist. And this isn't just kind of life coaching or spiritual counseling. This is serious stuff. I mean, if you have been infected with, the results of this horrific mental illness because you've been a partner to somebody who has it, then this needs real therapy. So I don't feel qualified to do that. It's possible if I chose to take clients and say, listen, I'm not a therapist, but I'll counsel you, I could probably be helpful, but the real question is it helpful for me? And what I found is that, trying to counsel somebody who's been on the other end of this, it's almost the same as trying to counsel somebody who has borderline personality disorder. And so it can be, very toxic. So I chose not to do that because I am still, even though I'm in a state of full recovery, I'm still in my recovery and maintaining it. And so I felt that was helpful for me. Second reason is that if I were to become a counselor, I would have to follow protocols and talk about the disease, the illness, and talk about the partners of BPDs in a clinical sort of way, and there's no shortage of people already doing that. What I have, which is perhaps unique, and what people have been saying that they've really been wanting, is the experiential understanding. How to heal oneself from an experiential level from that kind of horrific, toxic experience. So I assume if you're watching this, you already know this is not designed to address people who are in therapy and in recovery, who are happy in their relationship. This is not for those people. This is for partners, non-borderlines. Borderlines, if you choose to, participate in this and it's helpful to you, my hair is off to you. But what this is really designed for is designed for the non-borderline who really needs to recover. But, anybody who benefits from it, I'm happy. I'm not excluding anybody. Just letting you know what the focus is. All right. So you've heard all that, me say that many times before, but let's continue. So this is the introduction. And what I want to share with you in this introduction is just give you some overview. Sorry, I'm arranging my notes here. I just want to give you some overview on what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to be sharing with you my three-step approach. So I'm going to really be, organizing this and really taking a look at it in depth. So I don't know yet, as this is the first video, how long this will be, but there might be quite a few videos in this. So my three-step approach, as you know, is number one, therapy, with a qualified therapist who knows how to deal with codependence with cluster B personality disorder relationships. The second one is working the 12 steps. And I recommend CoDependence Anonymous, but Al-Anon will work. ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, will work because they deal with a lot of the same kinds of issues. And if you happen to be, let's say, the child of an alcoholic, maybe ACA is the way to go. If you are, somebody who's, been with somebody who was alcoholic or drug addict, maybe Al-Anon is the way to go. But CoDependence Anonymous is the focus on what really is and I don't care how you look at it. If you want to see yourself as I do, as somebody who was codependent before you got into the relationship with the borderline, or the relationship itself created a codependence. I don't care how you look at it. If you're now out of the relationship, you're now suffering from the effects of BPD codependence. So those are the two steps. The third step is having a daily spiritual practice. So what I'm going to be doing in these videos is I'm going to be talking about the first part of it. So let me break it up for you a little bit here. The 3 steps, I thought I would kind of help classify and identify why the 3 steps are important. So before we get into that, let me just say this. I've been in therapy for over 25 years. I've been in 12-step work for almost 40 years. I've been a spiritual person, pretty much my whole life, but in terms of really focusing on a spiritual discipline, definitely my whole adult life. And what I have found, and what others that I know who have long-term health and recovery, it's important. They have long-term continuous health and recovery. They all say the same thing, including mental health professionals whom I know who also have long-term recovery. And they all say the same thing. You can't just have one of these things. There are definitely some shortages to just therapy, because as many people say when they complain about therapy, lots of times they'll say, well, therapy is just talk. And there's some truth to that, in that going to a therapist is extremely important, because you have to identify what the unconscious, unresolved issues are. So that's why the step 1 is there. You have to have, a surgeon. They're basically, emotional psychological surgeons. They're going to go in there and they're going to help you bring to your consciousness unresolved issues in your unconscious mind. The second is the 12 steps, which is the most effective way to reprogram and heal those unresolved unconscious issues. And the third step is the spiritual. This is where you connect your identity, which you are really trying to find in the first 2 steps, and you're going to connect that to the idea of a soul. So I've found this through almost 40 years of experience in this. And if you've heard me talk in a couple of my videos, when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I was a very seriously messed up individual. And I was in unbelievable amounts of pain, emotional, psychological pain. So I know, because I've got a whole adulthood, I'm 60 is not too far away. I've got a whole adulthood of looking at, what works and what doesn't. So those have been the 3 steps that have worked for me. And, like I said, one of the people I'm talking about is actually a therapist, who themselves will say, listen, you got to have more than just the talk therapy. You got to have more than just the 12 steps. So what happens with therapy, the shortcoming of just therapy, is that depending on the kind of therapy it is, what one of the pitfalls is that if the patient has any unconscious resistance which is very common, then what will happen is they will get themselves in a rut where they will say, yeah, I've heard all this before. I know what my problems are. Nothing is changing. And so they have an intellectual awareness of what their unconscious issues are, perhaps, but they don't have any method, any ability to do anything about it or change it. And so it feels just like a waste of time talking about it. And that's something that I learned, is that people who only focus on therapy can sometimes fall into the trap of thinking that if I can intellectually uncover what the unconscious issue is, then it'll fix itself. And it doesn't. It won't fix itself. That's like going to the doctor and having the doctor diagnose you with some, malignant disease and say, and just that, whoa, that's enough. Now I know. No, actually, now you got to go into surgery and into, all kinds of other things to heal it. You got to take medication, whatever it is. There's more to it than just seeing the problem and intellectually understanding it. So that's one of the pitfalls of just therapy. The 12 steps, as I said, if I had to choose just one, I would choose the 12 steps. No two ways about it. In fact, I've found that people benefit from therapy much better if they've been in 12-step recovery for years. If they've been in 12-step recovery for years and then they get into therapy, they really benefit from it. And so lots of times, I would even say to somebody, listen, just, go to meetings and work the steps for a few years, then go to therapy. My experience was after almost 11 years of recovery in 12 steps is that because I was working the 12 steps and recovering, what ended up happening is all of my unconscious childhood issues came to the surface, and I had a meltdown, and I became clinically depressed and all kinds of other things, and I had to seek out therapy. And I recommend that you shop. Find the therapist that works for you. I found a therapist who was also in 12-step recovery, who was also a spiritual practitioner, and so it was a good fit for me. And so then it was, I could now work on both, therapy, 12 steps. Now, the 12 steps have within it a suggestion to have a spiritual practice. It doesn't really tell you how to do that. There's a couple of little things that you can do in there, but it doesn't really teach you, a specific path like, Buddhist meditation or yogic meditation or, contemplation. It doesn't really go into that because it's not affiliated with any religion. It basically says find your own religion and practice it. Find your own spiritual path and practice it. And what I found is that for me, and I think, if it works for me, there's no reason why it wouldn't work for others. This is the three-pronged approach that is necessary for full recovery. So, look, let me be clear. If you don't have a whole lot of experience with these, and there's a good chance you probably have, little to no experience with, two, if not all three of these three-pronged approaches, then it may take you longer to achieve the state of recovery I'm in. I was lucky. I wasn't so lucky in that I definitely stepped in a bear trap. I did not know what borderline personality disorder was. And because of there was still some unresolved things within me from childhood, and I had just lost my soulmate to cancer a couple of years earlier, and she was my soulmate, and I was devastated, and there was still this, this sadness, and I had done my best to try and work through it, but obviously I hadn't worked through all of it. Along came the borderline, and you know how they are. She put on the right facade and was everything I was looking for, and so I just transferred those unresolved, the love I had for my fiance who passed away, I transferred it onto the borderline. So on the one hand, she, helped me overcome the pain of some issues I had with my mom that were unresolved. And she helped me finally put to rest the loss of my fiance. Now, I'm not saying that that was the ideal way to do it, but that's what I got out of my recovery. What I'm trying to say here is that there's a good chance that if you don't have the experience, it may take you a little longer. For me, because of all of that experience, because I had done all that, and because I knew how to do it, even though it was a struggle, don't get me wrong, it was still a struggle, very much so. Even though I had that experience and I knew how to do all that stuff, it took me a couple of months of intense work, and then I was able to completely heal that wound, which was incredibly surprising to me. I thought for sure that I was going to be living with this pain for the rest of my life. I thought that I was going to stay broken. I thought I had been broken and I would stay broken. And I thought that I would probably gain some recovery, but it would be very slow and very painful. And that is not what happened. It was very hard in the beginning and it seemed impossible. I didn't know how I was going to survive without her. I didn't know how I was going to make it. And then a couple of months later, I began to forget. I literally forgot about that whole 2 months, and not in a denial way. It had been healed. And I was like, oh, that's right. I had that thing that happened. That was really horrible. I didn't think I was going to survive that. So I want to share this with you because I think it's really important. The miraculous and quick healing and recovery that I had is a result of this three-pronged approach. So what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to be a therapist in this video series. I'm not going to teach you the 12 steps. You can go to coda.org right now and start doing it on your own. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to reference these things, but it's not my job to take you through those. That's not what this is. And what I am going to do is I'm going to share with you what I found to be important about these things, and I'm going to give you specific understandings about why it works, what it is that you're actually accomplishing. After my almost 40 years of being it, I now have some understandings about why you do things the way you do in 12 steps, and why therapy works, and what's important to understand about the conscious and the unconscious mind and childhood programming and all that stuff. And in terms of the third aspect of the approach is I'm going to give you some specific things to do that, if you want to call them spiritual, you can, but really what they are is I'm just going to give you some approaches to different kinds of meditative practices, meditative disciplines that you can take the knowledge and put it in there, and I think speed up the recovery. So we'll be talking about a lot of things. I am going to be talking about spiritual concepts. It's okay with me if you're not a spiritual person. It's okay with me if you don't like it or don't understand it. If you are spiritual or see yourself as a spiritual person, then no problem. But let me address somebody who might see themselves as an agnostic or an atheist, or like me, somebody who went through traditional religion and it was a very toxic experience. First off, I'm not going to get into anything religious. There's not going to be any religious dogma here whatsoever. I'm not going to tell you what God is or is not, or who they, she, it is. What I am going to do is, right now, what I'll share with you is that even if you choose to believe that there is nothing out there, you can still, for instance, you can still be an atheist or an agnostic and work the 12 steps. Even though it has the word God in there, once you understand that, the only reason they use the word God in there is because the 12 steps were invented, or, the latest form of them were invented in the 1930s, and that's all they had. There was no such thing as New Age religion back then. They had church and synagogue, and that was it. So the only thing that connected them to something spiritual was this word called God. And then they went and started calling God as you understand God. But now we would say something like a spiritual or a non-physical force of your own understanding. So even if you're an atheist, you can understand there's things like electromagnetism, there's things like, just breathing oxygen and, things maybe that we can scientifically pinpoint, but maybe we don't quite understand how it all works. That I'm going to say that at the very least, I believe that human beings have evolved to have spiritual beliefs. Whether that's, if you go back far enough in history, you'll find that every religion, and every person's, every human, if you go back more than, 3,000 or 4,000 years, you start to find that everybody was had some kind of shamanic or animistic religion. And that kind of thought process, even if you don't believe it's true, seems to be something that has been necessary for the human brain in order to function and be happy. And so, at the very least, if you choose not to believe in a God or some kind of force or a power greater than yourself, whatever it is, then just kind of go through the motions, understanding that at least there's some part of your brain that has evolved to respond positively to these kinds of ideas, which will then help the brain think better. And that's the whole point. My whole point here is to give you something practical that you can use that will help you to recover. And again, my idea is to help you recover to the point where you can have what I have right now. I have zero pain, zero scars. I am not impeded in my life in any way based on that horrific experience. And let me be very clear. As you can tell, I've been through a lot as a kid. I grew up in an alcoholic household. My father was an alcoholic. He drank himself to death. Codependent mother with, I would say, some pretty intense borderline tendencies. I had an older brother who was physically and psychologically very abusive to me. Physically used to, intimidate me and pound the crap out of me. And so, and I had, as I said, other things that I had to go to 12-step groups for. So I had no shortage of stuff that I had to work through myself. But having said that, as horrible as all that was over that long period of time, I had never experienced anything so incredibly powerfully destructive and toxic as being in a romantic relationship with an untreated, undiagnosed person with severe, quiet, borderline personality disorder. I've never seen anything like it before and hope never to see anything like it in the future. So for me to say that I have achieved a state of recovery, I'm not just saying I'm making it through, I'm trudging along. I mean, I'm recovered from it. As long as I continue my conscious awareness and, continuing to do these videos is going to be something very helpful as well. There's every reason to believe that I won't be, falling into another relationship with somebody who has a cluster B personality disorder. So I want to share that with you. I'm going to share with you my thoughts, and I'll give you some specific instructions on how to do that. Now, I'm going to say something that I say on my other channel. I have another channel where I teach shamanism and spirituality and all kinds of mysticism and other things. And you're free to check that out, thunderwizard.com on YouTube. You're free to check that out. But what I say on that is people who follow my courses and my meditations and things like that, I say, number one, if you want what I have, you got to do what I do. And number two, I say that every single student of mine who follows my directions to the letter consistently always improves, always ends up transforming. So I'm going to say the same thing here, not with as much intensity, because this isn't, you're not my spiritual student. I'm not teaching you mysticism. But I will say generally the same thing. If you follow my specific suggestions and you do them to the best of your ability, and you do them consistently, I can guarantee you healing. What degree of healing, maybe I can't guarantee that. Maybe guarantee is too strong of a word, but it's been the case with all of my other students. It should be the case here. If you follow my suggestions to the best of your ability and do them consistently, there's an extremely good chance that you not only will get better, but eventually will completely recover. So with that, I'll put an end to the introduction, and in the next video I'll start talking to you about my theories. And again, that's all it is. Again, I'm not a therapist. I'm here just as a human being who has some thoughts and has achieved some recovery. So it's important to know the basic assumption about what we are as people and relationships and all that. And so I'm going to be sharing that with you. And I think if you understand that, then going forward as we go into more specific suggestions, you'll be even better armed to really take a look at what's going on with you, the pain that's continuing, the poison that's within you, and to turn that around and to heal yourself. All right? So enough of my babbling. So that's it. This is the introduction, and I'll see you in video number 1. All right. See you in a little bit.